All right, everyone, welcome. So I'm just going to get to a few housekeeping things first before we can kick it off. So this is the advocacy training. You are in the right place. And we're going to be talking about harnessing the power of storytelling to tell your recovery story. So just a few housekeeping things. We're going to have 3 sections today. First, we're going to talk about introduction to advocacy. Then we're going to get into some storytelling, and Delegate Sam Rasool is going to be joining us. Then we're going to be talking about 2021, and there will be a question section. And just a quick plug here, go ahead and join our newsletter if you haven't already, so you can stay up to date with everything Sarah is doing.
On me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay.
Awesome. The screen share.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Just want to firstly express a deep gratitude for you all showing up. I know a day full of Zoom meetings and other virtual events. This is just another one, but we hope that we're able to bring you some tools and resources this evening that will not just benefit you, but benefit the recovery community at large. Tonight, we're joined by 2 speakers, Becky Bowers-Lanier, who is the president of B2L Consulting. And Becky has 17 years of lobbying and advocacy experience, particularly working with healthcare and education nonprofits. So we're really excited for Becky to just kind of walk through some of the nuts and bolts of advocacy, some of the terms coming up with the legislative session. Later in the evening, we will be joined by Delegate Sam Rasool of Virginia's 11th House of Delegate District. He's been there since 2014. And for some of you, that is the city of Roanoke. And we also have Betsy Stewart, who is our Communications and Development Coordinator. And Betsy will sort of do our housekeeping throughout the event. And of course, I'm Victor McKenzie. I'm the Executive Director of Sarah, Virginia.
Thank you, Victor. One quick thing, as we go along here, if you have a question, go ahead and put that in the chat box, and we will get to it as we're going, or there will be a question section at the end, like I said. So moving along here.
Cool. For some of you who are joining us for the first time, or this is your first interaction with Sarah, or whether it is, you've been supporting us for years, we are the Substance Abuse and Addiction Recovery Alliance. We are a statewide organization, and our goal is really advocating for individuals and the families affected by substance use disorder and addiction. Our core pillars are, of course, advocacy, such as statewide. We work with the general, we work with the general session and legislators advocating on bills and laws that really support the recovery community or that system of care for substance use disorder. Some of the bills we supported in the past that went into law this past session, July 1st, were the SB 667. Example of that is no one can be arrested for reporting an overdose. Or even SB 124, no person can be denied TANF because of drug-related felony. So these are the type of bills that we support, and you'll hear more about that from Becky and also from me at the end of that. Another pillar is education. Events like this, the ability to bring tools and resources to the community, to peers and to supporters in order to advance some of these advocacy priorities, but also just really bringing those resources to the community. The more knowledge that we are able to share and bring, the better for the community we are. And lastly, support. And for us, support looks like peer recovery support services. We do that in really 3 programs. We do that with peer recovery groups, which we have Linda Clark, who is on with us this evening. She is a peer recovery specialist for the Sarah Center, and I think we have a couple volunteers as well. We partner with several organizations to operate a regional warm line that is staffed fully by peers. So if you or someone else you know is experiencing addiction or looking for resources, you're able to call into that line, just be greeted and welcomed by a peer who's been through those shoes, who knows the feeling, the stigma, and has the ability to offer support in many ways. And lastly, we also support 2 peer recovery specialists on the behavioral health docket. We realize that our peers and people who suffer from substance use disorder and addiction are over criminalized. So we work with a team of, we call it a care team, with clinicians, judges, and lawyers to really advocate on behalf of the best recovery practice. And we're also supported, largely by grassroots efforts, donors, supporters, volunteers, but also in addition, the Department of Behavioral Health and Disability Services. And we enjoy a great partnership with Richmond Behavioral Health here in the Richmond location, supporting those recovery supports. You can go to the next one. So what's at stake, and why advocacy for SUD is important? Representation matters. The ability to share your story and put a face and really an experience to what we know is happening is the most powerful tool we have in order to push change. There is no legislation does not change without organizing and advocacy. So your story matters. And these are some of the things we talk about. We talk about suicide numbers. We talk about the overcriminalization, unemployment, school dropout. All of these things are intersectional and they affect a person's recovery. They affect, a person in long-term recovery, whether it's down the line or it's happening right at that moment. These are all cross-sectional. And so we want to be supportive of anything that falls in line with that system of care. Go to the next one. And every day we're getting new facts and new numbers about addiction, overdose, substance use, just from around the state. And some of the things that we do know is that close to 500,000 adults in Virginia have substance use disorder. We know that 1 out of 2 who experience substance use disorder have a co-occurring mental health disorder. And we also know, kind of the support in that overcriminalization, that there were almost 75,000 drug arrests in 2018. And those numbers have continued to climb. So we have been advocating, like I mentioned that bill earlier, that if you're calling to report an overdose, you can't be arrested or prosecuted. That's a form of harm reduction, we believe. And I think what's important to know is these aren't just numbers on a graph. These are lives. These are that have affected families and communities. This is unrealized potential. And so much of this is avoidable if we are properly addressing addiction as a disease and providing adequate and timely resources and support. And so down here we have the opioid epidemic, we have the arts program, we have harm reduction. And right now, as you all know, we're going through COVID, which makes it so much harder. It's affecting people in so many different ways. Folks who have been really anchored over the years now are finding challenging times with the isolation of the pandemic, of being quarantined. So it's a lot going on. And more than ever, I think being able to share your story and the stories of those that you support is important more than ever.
Oops. Sorry, I think I thought this was my go. Is this?
Yeah, I was going to pass it off.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to pass it over. So with that, I do want to pass the ball to Becky.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here with you. And I look like So if I look this way, am I looking right at my camera? Can you see me looking right at my camera? Or do I?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's just where I want to be. I just want to start out briefly, and I'm very happy to be working with Sarah. I've been working with Sarah since Mark Blackwell was executive director. So that's been a long time. And I know some of you and others of you, I'm happy to know you tonight. So Betsy said that she had sent a survey and had gotten some response. And I want to just query the people who are here. And some of you have turned off your video, so I can't see you raise your hand. But those of you who are here, I can see you. How many of you have indicated on the survey that you have advocated before or lobbied before? Xavier? There's in the training room. Thank you guys. Great. Glad to hear that. So you have been to, and Frederica, excellent. How many, for those of you who are here, true confessions, how many of you know who your delegate is? Hands raised. Good. How many of you know who your state senator is? And this is not Warner or Kane. Yay, excellent. All right, so I'm speaking a lot to the choir, but I'm speaking to some people who are new to this work, and that's great. I want to tell you a little bit about, we're talking about stories, and advocacy I see as a journey. It's not something that you do overnight, although there are some people that you know who are probably what I would say very loud and get in your face about certain things and want to make change happen. And those are advocates who do a great job, as long as they don't get too far in your face at this, especially right now with COVID the way it is. But at any rate, my story is one that I was sort of dragging my feet about, knowing that it was important to talk about what I did. I'm a nurse by trade, and nurses, I think, sometimes are not recognized. They're like teachers. They're like peer recovery specialists. We do our job. We do them well. We do them well. People don't notice it because life goes on and it's good. When we screw up in our jobs, that's when people notice it. And so I didn't know a whole lot about advocacy, but when it came time for me to kind of put my foot to the ground and say, all right, I need to learn a little bit more about this. As a member of my profession, I joined my professional association and I started to speak out about nursing and nursing issues. And so, and that, you know, is for me is a journey of, you know, one step at a time. So then fast forward toward the end of my career, when I'm close to 60, I start lobbying for a full-time job. And so I do this all the time now, and I really like what I do. And I can use my own stories when I'm talking with people, if I'm talking about issues that are my kinds of issues. When I'm talking about issues that belong to my clients, then the best storytellers are those who live it on a day-to-day basis. And that's why it's really important to have you be involved in this. So advocacy means finding your voice. And you can read these slides. I don't want to, you know, bother you about this, but here's a question for you. Like, we're moving into 2021. So how long is the legislative session going to take place? The one that starts January the 13th, 2021. I know it. All right, let me ask you this, because you're all muted. How many of you think that the session should be over February 13th, 2021, 30 days? How many of you think that the session should be over at the end of February, 45 days, 2021? All right, Howard has raised his hand. Most of us would agree with you. You're right, because it's 2021. It's an odd year. And it should be a 45-day session. However, some of the senators have said they only want a 30-day session, which the Constitution provides for. So right now we're talking about a session that's going to move like, not a freight train, but move like supersonic jet. And I don't know how we're going to get through everything we need to get through in 30 days. That's coming up. So that's what we've got in front of us. And then the other thing that we've got in front of us that makes things a little bit different is what we're all facing right now, COVID. And that is we can't get to face touch the people that we are trying to influence. And that's very tough. So we do it mostly like we're doing right now, which is talking on Zoom calls. Your policymakers are members of the House, and we'll hear from Sam Rasool later on in the presentation, and your state senators. And we've got 100 delegates and we've got 40 senators. Let's move on to the next slide.
Sure. Quickly, Becky, we have had 2 questions in the chat for you. So the first is, you said you were working with Sarah for a long time. What would you consider your title to be? Are you a legislative liaison?
I call myself a consultant. What I have done in my role with Sarah is really to work in a coaching capacity. At least that's how I've started, working in a coaching capacity with Mark over the years. And so I do what Victor asks me to do. When he asks me to do something, I do it. So I'm a consultant. See, if I consider myself a liaison, it would be that I'm sort of like the go-between, which is what I consider liaison to be. So you would want something and I would be the go-between with the members of the General Assembly and the policymakers. That's not my role. My role is really to work with how Victor wants me to work. And so now I'm working in a teaching capacity and in a consulting capacity, but the real advocates are you all. That's the real advocacy piece. That's for you to be telling your story and making the asks that are important for substance use disorder treatment and recovery.
Thank you. And
that
then
was the first question. What's the second question?
The second question was, does the length of this upcoming session, what does that have to do with the special session?
We had a special session in the summertime, as you all remember. The special session was called as a result of COVID and the potential fiscal impact that COVID would have on the Commonwealth. So the budget was not finalized at the end of the session in 2020, which was supposed to be over around the middle of March. Instead, the budget was held on to, and that was the budget that's supposed to start in July of 2020. So what they did was they called back a special session. The governor called a special session to deal with the budget. Ordinarily, that's what they would do. Just deal with the budget, make some decisions based on the revenue prospects, and then everything would be, they'd go back home and they would come back again in January. It didn't happen quite like that because they also started dealing with bills that had to do with COVID, and then with the racial justice issues and the things that happened in the wake of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd's unfortunate, terrible deaths. There was a lot of discussion about making things right. And so the session lasted actually longer than a regular session. I can't remember how many days, but it went on forever. So that was a special session. Normally we don't have a special session, but I suspect we'll have a special session next year again. Can we agree on the underlying, did that answer both of the questions that we had, Betsy? I guess so.
Yep, we're all good.
Okay. So I wrote this question here. Often when we talk about wanting changes in policies in the way we do things, somebody else said we need to have a law about that because they figure the only way we get change is with a law. Most of us know that that's probably not the way we live our lives. And so what you'll sometimes hear policymakers talk about is, can we agree on the underlying policy that we want to make changed, and then figure out if we need to change the law or if we just need to do things differently without a law. So that's what that means. Policies really drive our work. you know, you work in, if you're working still, you're working in or agencies or organizations where there are policies that you have to follow. And I've got some policies listed right there on the slide. Let's go to the next one. So to what extent should you as recovery advocates be involved in policy development and implementation? I use this example about if you're not at the table, what are you? And you've probably heard this before. If you are not sitting at the table, you're probably being eaten. And that means it's very important for you to be involved in the work that you do and the causes for which you work. So you are working for people in recovery. You are in recovery. This is what you are doing. And unless you are talking about being in recovery and what people in recovery need. Oh, here comes Sam. I guess he's still getting on. Then somebody else is going to be making those decisions for you. And that is not what you want. Hi, Sam. He's still connecting. So I have listed these sort of top 10 things that I think are important for being in recovery as an advocate. Keeping abreast of what's happening nationally and statewide. Talking about recovery services and how recovery service can work in the opioid epidemic and how COVID epidemic has changed recovery services. I've heard some of the discussion that's been taking place about how COVID has changed things. Some people say using the Zoom virtual methodologies of having communication for groups and for people to stay in contact with each other works pretty darn good. And it gets more people to the table than were not there before. People don't have to travel far. They just go to their TV, they go to their device, they go to their phone, and they are in their meetings. And I've heard a lot more of people say that they feel more lonely and more estranged because they can't be around other people. So it's a mixed bag right now. But I think it's important for you to be able to say, this is what's happened since COVID came. If it's working out better for you, then say it, because the environment in which the recovery services is being offered is important in terms of, do we need to continue policies? Do we need to reimburse for these services? How do we do that? That's important. The next bullet down is to vote. And I had a necklace on that said vote until after the November election. I took it off. I'm going to put it back on once the campaign starts up again this coming year, because that is really, really important. Oops, wait, go back. Can you go back? Okay. And this don't sit idly by. You see that at the bottom on the left? That means you don't want to be eaten at the table. You want to be at the table eating something else, but talking about recovery. Don't burn your bridges is really important. And if you're talking with a policymaker whom you don't really like politically or ideologically or whatever, and that person is your policymaker, you need to not burn that bridge. I mean, you just keep it to yourself and you talk about what you need. You can talk about that person after you get out of the room, but do not burn bridges with the person who is responsible for making decisions in terms of policies and laws for your issues. We educate on issues, not on bills, and that's because we are a 501c3. We talk about the issues, we educate. We don't talk about specific bills. So let's see, be honest and maintain your humor. That's really important. You gotta, if you can't laugh at something, you're gonna cry. So I just try to laugh things off. So let's go on to the next one. It is 5:30, understanding the process. Do we want to have Sam talk next? Because he's here, and then we can go back to talking about the process later. Victor, what do you think? Because I hate to hold Sam up.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think we're okay to start with that. Sam, are you on? I know that you had taken yourself off. Are you there?
I am.
Okay,
I am.
cool. All right.
Welcome, Delegate Razul. How are you doing?
I am well. I'm well, and yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good to be with you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I hear that Becky was deep into some things, so I don't want to mess up your flow, Becky.
You didn't mess up my flow at all.
Okay, that's fantastic. Happy to. So I've got a few things, and I've got a quick little few slides that I can show with some lobbying tips. Maybe I can jump into some of that, and then happy to answer any questions that you all may have. But first, kind of maybe by way of quick introduction, I'm Delegate Sam Rasool, represent Roanoke in the 11th District, going into my 8th year in the General Assembly, 4 terms. I sit on the Health Committee, the Elections Committee, the Education Committee, and the Public Safety Committee. So as Vice Chair of the Health Committee, we see some of the issues that are pressing that you all have been discussing. It is great to be with you. So Victor, just so I know, we are all over Virginia today. Is that right?
Correct. We have folks from all over our great Commonwealth. And just say we did give you the red carpet in the beginning, so folks are familiar with you.
Okay, fantastic. Let's jump on in. I'm going to see if I can share these few slides that I have right here. Mute. We'll go right into some lobbying tips, and then go from there, which is great. So most of the citizen lobbying that I have seen is fairly unproductive because legislators do not want you to know the most productive way to lobby, because that puts more pressure on us. And so we're going to give you some pro tips inside baseball on things that you should keep in mind. And these are, by the way, disclaimer, these are all my opinion and things that I've put together. So you're more than welcome to push back, or if you've got some things to add, we'd love to hear it. So first, don't be intimidated. We're just as intimidated by you many times. People kind of come in, maybe there's a few butterflies, and we're human beings with all the same issues. I've got 3 children at home. I had to feed them and then rush on over to the office as my wife was coming back from work. So look, we're all going through the same the same kind of life experiences in similar respects, meaning. And so come in very confident, and don't be too intimidated. Let me see if this thing, oh, looky there. See if technology will work for me. Here we go. So number 2, be brief. Your meeting, usually during session, especially when you're educating us, you have like 15 minutes. Outside of session, you have some extra time. But just know that usually the delegate or senator is just operating on a very limited amount of time. So if you or a group of you are coming in to lobby or to educate, excuse me, Becky, to educate, then make sure you don't spend a whole lot of time on people's resumes and background, all that good stuff. Just to get to a 2-minute intro, get right into your issues, and go from there. You want 5 minutes to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Let the legislator respond for 5 minutes, and then y'all come to a conclusion with the last 5 minutes. Number 3, be prepared.
Hey, Sam, before you go on, can I just say something about being brief?
Yes.
But in the South, it's very important to visit before you start in, even though it only may be 2 minutes. Now, I'm from the North, and we just get right down to business. And I learned very early when I moved to Virginia, people would say to me, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, Pennsylvania. Well, I knew you weren't from around here. And what they were really saying to me was, "You don't recognize me. You're just going right to what you want." And so now I have learned, if I've had an experience with this person before, I'll bring that up. Or if I don't know this person at all, I might say, "Wow, that's a great tie you have on." Something to individualize. It doesn't take more than 30 seconds, but it does say to the person that you're talking to that you are recognizing something about that person. So I don't want to disagree with you because you're the delegate and I'm just but I do think that's important.
Becky, I've been taking orders from you for years now, so there are no disagreements here, Becky. You're exactly right. When you're a politician like me, it just kind of will naturally flow. So I'll look at Victor. I'm like, "Oh, Victor, you got a guitar hanging up back there. Are you into some music?"
And that's true. You visit. So.
Oh, I love doing it, and so for me, I'll usually break the ice back, with folks to have them be comfortable. What I've noticed is there are 140 of us. And it's always great to try to find something, because then you become more personable and they remember that about you, for sure. The trick is how to do it quickly. So if you've done your homework in advance, that always helps. And so you'll know Sam has 3 kids, and so mentioning something about kids will probably make him feel a little warm and giddy. I think you're spot on, Becky, about trying to figure out how to use that time wisely is critical, because you're trying to get it all done in a short period of time, for sure. So we won't let Yankees like Becky ruin it for us down here, for sure. Number 3, be prepared. So sometimes people will come in and bring like a stack of information. Usually the delegate or senator is going to do most of their reading about your issue in front of you while you all are talking. So if you've got a thick stack of information, I'm a policy dork. I love learning about things. And so I'll dig down deep, and Becky's seen me, at work. I really want to know the stuff. But most of us are like an inch deep and a mile wide. There's just so much, especially as part-time legislators. So you want to make sure that the whatever you're going to hand out, that also is just a simple 1-page, please support this issue. Here's 3 reasons why. If you're asking to support a specific bill, just make sure that that's nice and big. And it just keeps the ask nice and simple. Because if you're coming to talk about substance abuse, and you're speaking in generalities, who's going to disagree with you? So you're not really advancing the agenda here, or whatever it may be. You want to be very specific about the money or the bill or the reform that is needed, and so that way we keep it laser focused. Number 4. Focus on the subcommittee and committee. There are 140 legislators, but only a handful of us really represent whether the bill or issue is going to live or die initially. And so to really understand where your votes are is critically important. Certainly, if you're visiting with us either in person or virtually, you want to hit all the home folks. So people from my area want to stop by and see me, but you really want to go and make sure you're hitting the subcommittee or committee that your bill or issue is going to. Number 5, make it personal. Maybe this ties back into Becky's point a little bit, where the issue, the thing that you're talking about, if you're able to bring it on back, and in all of it. So if I was talking about music therapy and then I saw that guitar, and then I would say, "Oh, you're into music too." But also bringing it back to the district. This specific issue represents, currently there are 2,000 people, or 13,000 teachers in your district, or a couple folks who have needed the kind of services that Sarah offers that are from your specific district as we move forward. This is important to bring it back so that way they know there are voters, there are people impacted in their district, and many times we just are not familiar with that. So as I mentioned, use some certain statistics also. So making it personal, but then using statistics from your legislator's district is important. Number 7, make sure that you're respectful of the staff. If you're not, your paper will get to me, but it might be at the bottom of the stack. And look, it's just basic respect, right? So, we all should respect one another, and that includes my hard-working staff, our hard-working staff. I hate to call them gatekeepers, but many times they are. We have very limited amount of time, and very few people have it like Becky, where she's just like texting me and like, "You're gonna do this," and I'm like, "Okay, all right, no problem." So I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then number 8, close strong and know what you're asking for. So you all are coming in and saying, "Oh, we're from Sarah of Virginia, specifically our office is in X and in the Roanoke Valley. We are wanting to advocate for so-and-so." And then the legislator might usher you back to, "Well, thank you so much for stopping by. We really appreciate your advocacy." You want to say, "Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Legislator, but how are you going to vote on this bill? Or will you support this budget amendment?" And so the 3 answers that are okay are yes, no, or I'm not sure. It's okay for them to tell you that they're not sure because they need to do more research, get more information. And then you can just say, "Great, would you mind if we just follow up with you in a few days or a week or whatever it may be, to just see if you have any additional questions or see how you're doing at that time." But the point is to hold us accountable because, who's going to be against healthcare, education, abuse, domestic violence, there are all these pieces that no legislator is going to say that they're against the broad topic or wanting to upset. But where you really want to hold our feet to the fire is in the advocacy for a specific bill. So those are just some quick pointers, if you don't mind, that I just wanted to share with you, if that was okay, Becky. Weaved in, and part of that might be, as you were talking about, kind of breaking the ice a little bit, or visiting, is maybe a tiny bit of storytelling, but keep your stories brief. And so so many lobbyists or educators come in and they know how to tell a quick story in 60 seconds about something that happened. "Oh, when I visited Roanoke, I got to see the Hotel Roanoke. Actually, the first time I went there, I was taking the bar exam, this, that, and the other." And so we're tying it back into something else that they know. People remember those stories either in the advocacy that you're pushing or something related to their life for sure. So with that, if it's okay, Victor and Becky, I'm happy to open it up to any questions that you might have about those tips or about lobbying in general.
Sure. I think, Betsy, if there's any questions in the queue, let's go ahead and read them off. We have any?
Nope, there are none in the chat.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you. Could you share with us maybe a brief story that moved you enough for a vote, whether, recently or just something memorable?
Well, I'll tell you something. It didn't really shift my vote, but it was pretty memorable. Okay. I remember maybe it was in 2015. If I recall correctly, there was a legislator carrying a bill around decriminalizing the possession of CBD oils, and specifically I think the legislator carrying the bill wasn't the one who made this speech, but then one legislator got up. By the way, both of them are Republicans. Then one legislator got up and told the story of this child where there was nothing that they could do to help this epileptic child other than having this oil, and they've tried everything, and to say, look, we're, because at that point there's this is like a tense conversation, because we're a conservative legislature. We were 66 Republicans to 33, 34 Democrats at that moment. And here we are talking about legalizing something that has anything to do with, you think of the oil back then, especially thinking of marijuana, right? And so here you have Republicans who are like pleading, this is something that's got to change. We've got to advance the conversation. And it was so heart-wrenching. And then at the end of his speech, he pointed to the little girl. She was sitting up there in the gallery, and her mom was next to her. And then the vote came up, and the vote was like, I think it was either unanimous or almost unanimous here in Virginia, this conservative legislature. And that mother busted into tears, and she was crying, and it was all emotional at that moment. And the legislator who had originally broached the subject, did it in such a way that really brought us all along emotionally. And it moved us, and it changed some policy. And then from there, Virginia each year has made some progress for sure. So it was just something that has stuck out in my mind when you asked the question.
Thank you. It looks like we do have one question in the chat. So as far as meeting to advocate and meeting with legislators, should an appointment be made, or is just dropping by acceptable?
If you are in the General Assembly, like in the building, you certainly can try to set up some meetings, because it's good to have something scheduled. Those meetings can be erased pretty easily, because our schedules are all over the place, but you might be able to meet with the LA, the legislative assistant, or someone else. But then what you do is, schedule some, and then use the rest of your time just buzzing to different, and just taking a chance, hey, figure out if there's a delegate or senator that you can catch, or their LA, because their LA will transfer some of that information into the voting system. For example, I use a computer system, and if Sarah, Virginia stops by and says, we, hope that you'll be able to support this kind of policy, which is related to this bill, that will be documented in my computer system. And when it comes up in my committee or subcommittee, I will be reading that. So that's probably your best strategy. Now, during COVID, with the 2021 session, it'll all have to be appointment. I think that there's no way around it. One thing that you all might consider is, and I haven't heard of anybody doing this, Becky, but is to have a reception during session virtually, and to have pick a morning, 9 to 11. I'm just making up times, but 9 to 11 is pretty good, because our session starts at noon. And then you have as many of your advocates, like what you have right here, be in that Zoom, and then invite legislators to come visit your Zoom, and they just can kind of pop in during the 9 to 11 block for this virtual reception, if you will, and let them address you, and also, hear, maybe take a couple of questions about certain issues. So I haven't really seen anybody organizing like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And we've been doing a lot of that before the session, but it's planning out and then meeting with legislators in larger groups. But I like that idea, Sam. Thank you.
We put it down. I think we're gonna do that.
I know, I've got it. I did want to share one story as we were talking about stories that are fast. I got a story a few weeks ago. I was on a Zoom call, and it was with some folks who were at Ballad Health, which is down in the Bristol area, and we were talking about COVID. And I can't remember the full context, but there was this huge man, white man, on the call, and he said, "I'm a peer recovery specialist for Ballad," and he said, "and I cannot work in Virginia." He said, "I have 5 felonies in my background. I've been certified. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been clean for 30 years. And I can work as a peer recovery specialist in Tennessee, and I cannot work in Virginia." That was the extent of the story. But that has been sticking with me ever since, because we've been trying to get changes to barrier crimes in Virginia. And Senator John Edwards in Roanoke has been after us trying to get a better system for barrier crimes. But we have a terrible system in Virginia that keeps people away from helping others who they are the best people to help with. And so, you know, that's a story. I can picture this man in my mind, and it was less than a minute. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and Becky, you've been in subcommittee meetings when, you know, many times legislators may not know a whole lot about a bill that's coming before them. But I've been in many subcommittee meetings where the testimony from the public with some stories really charges us emotionally and changes things. Especially if it's not like a super partisan issue, like we're kind of indifferent, something new. You know, I don't know how this impacts things generally. And then someone comes up and says, you know, here it is, my story.
And you also said one thing earlier about having data, and I was thinking we have representatives of Sarah from the regional areas. And if you are meeting with your legislators in your area, it's helpful to know at least an estimate of how many people in your area have substance use disorder or in recovery, how many people you are serving, and any other data that you can bring along. The data are important. I mean, you get somebody like Sam Rasul who likes data, you know, he's going to want to know, well, how big of an impact is this going to have? And I'm trying to pull at his heartstrings by telling him a story, and he wants to know what the data are. So there is always a tension between sharing a story and then having the data also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, finding that balance for sure.
Betsy, was there another question that came up?
Yes, there is one question. So who do you advocate to, or how do you start advocating for peer recovery specialists in the barrier crimes that were mentioned in Virginia? Where do we start?
You know, Becky had mentioned that the Senator Edwards, for example, has been a champion. Many times they come through. Sometimes they've come through the health committee, which has been interesting, and sometimes they go through the courts of justice. It just depends on who's in charge and if they like the potential there. The courts of justice is never really friendly to these issues, but many times for these types of barrier crimes, they actually do come through the health committee, and so you know, you'll want to figure out what kind of advocates are working on barrier crimes, see if they're following specific bills, or if there's a legislator that is working on those bills. I'm not familiar with one for the 2021 session, and maybe Becky knows better. And look, it's all about the hustle. This is, especially with regards to barrier crimes. I mean, we're all friends here. You know, Republicans are tough on crime, and you know, Democrats are a little tough on crime. I mean, there ain't no you know, Democrats tend to really, as a Democrat, tend to be really, really squirmish when it comes to these kinds of issues. And I think it's just terrible that we have put so many of these barriers in place to employment. And so, in other words, if y'all are not coming to bat, don't expect the legislators to do it. It is tough. Even with Democrats in charge, there's just this kind of tough on crime mentality that really started back in the early 90s. And ever since then, Democrats have been on the defensive. You know, please don't call me soft on crime during a campaign. I don't know what I'll do with myself. You know, instead of owning the narrative about the equity and people having access to employment, wanting to move on with themselves, and the cost to society by not, you know, allowing X, Y, and Z. We just haven't owned that narrative. And so I hope that if you, there probably will be a bill, because every year there is a bill related to barrier crimes. I just don't know who's going to carry it. But once you find out about it, you better get everyone and your friends on top of it to put some pressure on that subcommittee and committee.
I would suspect that this coming year.
Doing that. I'm sorry, Beck. I just wanted to add, I'll say that's something that Sarah is following too. So when you're looking at some of these, I think, issues, you want to see who's doing the work already. And is it something that's in line with what you want to do? Because the stronger, you know, the more we can kind of cultivate that coalition building, and that's the stronger our voice becomes when we're talking to legislators. And we'll have the ability to not just, you know, talk to someone in their home district. If we have 300 people, we're talking all throughout the Commonwealth. So, you know, obviously you can follow Sarah, but there are some other organizations who are doing work in this space because it's multifaceted. So I think that's an important step as well. That's all I wanted to say.
I have a question. I didn't type it in the chat, or can I just ask?
Go for it.
It's of art. You know, the governor, he's going to talk tomorrow about new COVID restrictions. And one issue for the recovery community are these limits. There's an exception for religious organizations. They can have a larger number of gatherings. And it's been raised many times for addiction, for the meeting, for recovery groups, can they fall under that same kind of category and just have a higher limit? Because there are people that need that in person. I mean, Zoom is wonderful and it benefits a lot of people, but there are those who need that in person, especially people who are new in recovery. And so is there a way to tackle that, or is there anyone to talk to that when the governor or when the decision is made, you know, about these limits, and I know this is a limited time, the vaccine is coming, so I don't know how much longer it'll be an issue, but maybe having recovery groups as in the same category as the religious organizations.
And so what is your current limitation on in-person recovery groups?
Well, it's not separate, so it's just the 25 people. That's across the state. And I'm concerned that tomorrow he'll probably say 10. He's going to lower it to 10. But again, usually religious organizations have a higher limit. I mean, they can have more people gathering.
Yeah.
And that is greatly going to impact these recovery groups. They're working with the 25 limit. But when you take it down to 10, that is like really going to impact a lot of groups. And just, is there any way to bring to his attention or to advocate so that recovery groups are in the same category as those religious organizations?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think what gets lost is that sometimes the numbers don't really make sense, and they've had to be pulled out arbitrarily. Look, I think that the people who are doing this have the best of intentions, because as somebody who has had COVID, you don't want it. And we have to have safety be paramount. But the problem is when you have numbers, there's so many different types of organizations. You know, for example, there are new restrictions on different restrictions, for example, related to numbers for restaurants, and it doesn't take into account like the size of the building and the occupancy is just a raw number. And I think that that's probably the distinction that needs to be made, because, you know, the training room that I'm looking in my Zoom, I mean, just looking at that, as somebody who had COVID, just looking at that many people in a room, I get anxious personally, you know, it's just how I am. But, and if I had 20 people in that training room, to me, that is not safe. With masks, it is not safe. But if I had a high school gym and I had 30 people in this high school gym and we had chairs, I'm just using a high school gym as an example, but, or a large cafeteria, or even you know, you had mentioned a church sanctuary. The science is clear. You know, if we have more cubic feet, because it's also the ceiling height and how much space, you know, so I think that the meeting should be related to, and this isn't a direct answer to your question, but I think that the meetings should be related to the occupancy space that people are in, not so much tied to the arbitrary number. And that's the safe thing, because there's a terrible way for 25 people to meet, and there's a terrible way for 10 people to meet too. But we can figure out ways of doing it that are safe if we're smart about it.
Okay, I won't belabor it, but I'll just say, and Becky can probably help. You talked about a one-page handout. Legislators need to see like the increase in the relapse rate from people from not being able to go to meetings and this isolation that has happened. I mean, it's greatly impacted people with not having the in-person meeting. Zoom is wonderful, but everybody doesn't want to do Zoom. And so I'm not going to belabor it. But I guess working with Becky and from the legislative aspect, you figure out the best way to get the message across. But it's greatly impacted people, that isolation.
So let me, Howard, let me back up for just a minute. This is something that the governor does. So the advocacy goes to the governor and his policy shop. So we can have a conversation about that, because that's how changes have been made in the executive orders, if they have been deemed to be too arbitrary. So let's wait till what happens tomorrow and then see, can we get, you know, can we come up with some kind of decision that does not have a negative impact, that gets to what Sam's talking about, the bigger space with a number of people. It may not happen, and it may only be temporary, but let's just see what he says, and then we work through the governor's policy shop to make a change.
Yeah, and I'm always happy for you to yell at me so I can yell at him.
Oh, hey, you're in it, honey. I'm going to yell at you too.
I know.
Because you're in the same party, so any help I can get from the members of the party, but the governor's got to be the one to make the decision.
Now you kind of plant a flag in it. That's also a conversation that we can help out with as well. You know, well, exactly. Be happy to outside of this to have a deeper conversation. But you know, my thought is always, how do we coalition build? How do we create really just some action with our organization, like organizations, and just grassroots support. So I think that's something that we can kind of take a look at, talk to some recovery residences and some other organizations who are doing specific recovery support services and say, hey, what are you seeing? What's different now than, you know, maybe last year, the year before? How can we build a consensus where it's not just, you know, it's not just Howard, it's not just Sarah. We're saying, you know, 5-10 organizations across the state, especially if we're talking to the governor. There's no home district. We're saying across the state, this is what we're seeing. This is what we need. And then there's also, and my last piece, there's also, you know, the Substance Abuse Service Council and other arms of the, I guess, you know, the administration that we can kind of bend to push to get what we need.
Well, and I think that that's the exact right way to approach it with these different coalitions. I mean, and to Howard's point, I've seen the 6-month data, going back to Becky. I mean, the 6-month data with regards to, you know, someone, for example, using medically assisted treatment with peer recovery and without peer recovery, there's a huge gap there. And so I completely appreciate and you know, obviously it stuck in my mind when I looked at the drop off and how bad it can be without I certainly appreciate the issue for sure. And so for me, it's always trying to figure out the creative way. I'd be going to them and say, hey, why didn't you have an occupancy-based rule as opposed to, just having a person rule or something like that. So that's the way we've typically approached it. But I appreciate the point, because the point is critically important to the work that you're doing. And by the way,
with that,
I just wanted to mention.
Yeah, I'll let you finish.
If I could, sorry. Someone a very, very close friend was having a very difficult time, and without the free services that this person was receiving through Sarah, I'm not sure if that person would have been able to come out the other side. So very thankful for the work that Sarah provides, all the services that Sarah provides for folks.
Well, thank you. We definitely do appreciate that. I do want to kind of open a space for one more question maybe, and then I know just kind of keeping an eye on time. If there's any more questions, if not, then I do want to bounce back to Becky to make sure we can kind of wrap up that section of things. And if you have a question that you want to ask the delegate or ask us, feel free to drop it in the chat or reach out to us afterwards. We would be more than willing to follow up with those. Good. All right. Well, thank you, Delegate Russell, for just kind of jumping in with us, riding the wave a little bit, and being able to really bring that voice from the big, scary legislator side of things to show us the inner workings. I definitely wrote down a bunch of your lobbying tips. I noticed that you have a blue shirt on. Blue is my favorite color.
All right.
Nice visit with him. Nice visit.
Yes, that's the way it is. Right.
All right.
Thank you, Sam.
So I'll kind of bounce it back to you, Becky.
Okay.
You want to...
All right. Betsy had left me a note about where, yeah. So let's just move along, because I want to be mindful of the time and keep going. Go to the next one, Betsy. Because we want to get, okay, so we were talking, some people have asked about how a bill becomes a law, and I'm not going to belabor the subject, but Sam started talking about it, that people come to him and then they kind of figure out that question that I asked earlier, is this a policy change that needs a law? A lot of times if you go to see your legislator about something, that legislator is going to try to make it into a law regardless, because that's what they do. And if they can get a bill passed for you, that's great. Otherwise, there may not be the need for it, and that bill may not get very far. But anyway, you start with something that's an idea. There are people who work in the General Assembly who are lawyers who put that into the right section of the Code of Virginia, the law, and use the right legal terms. And then he said, as you recall it in his presentation, that you want to get to the subcommittee members. In our General Assembly, because things move so quickly during the General Assembly, the decisions really about a bill's success or failure is made in a subcommittee meeting. And that may be only 7 people out of 140 that'll make a decision whether your bill passes or not. So that means those people are very important. What may happen starting in January, if we have a 30-day session, is we don't know whether there will be subcommittee meetings, which is kind of strange. But anyway, then if you remember from civics, if a bill starts in the House, it has to pass a House committee, then it has to pass the House, and then it crosses over and it has to go through the same process in the other side. So Betsy, if you move to the next slide, I have some kind of graphic here that shows this. Here it is. So you have an idea, you get a patron, that is somebody like Sam Rasool, who will get the bill drafted for you. It goes to a committee, and then it'll have, if it passes, it goes to the full floor of the House or the Senate. It has to be read 3 times, so it has 3 days where it has to be heard. And then if it passes, it goes to the other House, and it goes through the same process again, goes to a committee in the other House, and it has to be read 3 times before it's passed. And then it gets sent to the governor for his signature. It's a long process, but there's plenty of opportunity along the way to make changes if need be, except when the session is only 30 days. Let's go to the next one. We're going to go on to the next one as a strategy. I did want to go on, we won't deal with that. And Sam talked a little bit about this, your presentation, where he was talking about be brief, be prepared, focus on subcommittee, make it personal. This is exactly very much like it. And I would say that, going back, the emails and the phone calls are probably what we're going to have to do this session. We're not going to be able to see people in person. Okay. Next. Next, keep going. Here we go. Can you get on that link? Can you click on that link, Betsy? So for those of you who need help getting who your legislator are, this is the link that will take you to your legislator. Now, hopefully.
Can I also say, Becky?
Yes.
So Sarah has, I feel like I'm just plugging Sarah all night.
Okay.
So we actually have a Find Your Legislator tool on our website too.
Okay, good. Never mind. We don't need that. Yeah. All right. Well, this is what it looks like, and it'll probably look the same way on the Sarah tool if you've got it hooked into the General Assembly. See where it says enter your address below? That's where you put your home address, and you have to use your street address, and you have to use your zip code. And that's really important to have your street address and your zip code because the districts are fine-tuned down to the streets. Okay, that's it. Then we can go back. Thanks. And then don't be confused when you get on that site. It'll say senators Mark Warner, Tim Kaine, and you'll think, oh, okay. Because I've asked my people, okay, now who is your senator? Who is your state senator? Well, I've got two, and they'll say Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. I say, no, that's not your state senator. Those are your federal senators. They're for the whole state. So you have to keep reading on down till you find. And your congressman is different from your delegate. At the federal level, your congressman is like your delegate, like Sam Russell is. But at state level, you need to have a delegate and you have a state senator. Okay, and then you can get on their Facebook pages. If you are into social media, you can follow them on Twitter. Almost all of them have Twitter feeds and social media pages, Facebook pages. I guess they have Instagram. I still haven't learned how to do Instagram very well. Okay. And Sam did that. I think that you're next. Or is this my next?
You can go back and you can take your time a little bit. We still have some time.
Okay, yeah. So this in 2021, this is I've already said this is going to move very fast. Victor, I do like the idea about holding a reception.
Same.
Like Sam mentioned, holding a reception. Having our Sarah people on a Zoom call throughout the morning, and then people can show up. We may have to flush out some of the details of that. That would be very similar to if you were going to the General Assembly and you were going to be in a conference room and order in coffee and Danish, and the legislators could come and visit you. That's what we used to be able to do before COVID. So that's how we're going to that's how we're going to advocate in the 2021 session.
I think that would be a fantastic idea. I'm already mentally
I am too. I think it's a great idea. Yeah. All right.
I'm sure Betsy is in the back end as well.
Yeah. What's next? Oh, okay. This is yours. Victor, I think this is yours.
Okay. Let me make sure my computer is. Okay, so jumping back into some of the items that both Becky and Delegate Russell talked about, because of COVID and the inability to meet in person, Sarah is really taking an approach of developing advocacy. Well, first off, signing up for our advocacy email alerts to find out what's happening in the legislation. As well as what Sarah's following, what you can kind of jump on to Howard's point. If we were following something with barrier crimes, you would be alerted and you could, provide your input or ways to support that. In addition, we are going to be creating and sharing petitions. Jumping right back to Howard's point, if we can build up enough coalition around that barrier crimes, and particularly, we want to say that recovery support groups are an essential service and it should be treated as such. Therefore, the numbers should be treated a little bit differently in the occupancy. That's something we can kind of write out and gather enough signatures to show that, there's real support around this priority, and shoot that out to your legislators. And for Sarah on the back end, kind of a combination of that, find your legislator as well as writing those letters. If you do it with us, it will automatically send out to whatever legislator is in your district. So you don't have to do any of the back end or sending out those individual things. You just sign your name on there, you put your address, and they'll shoot it out automatically, as well as provide you any phone numbers, emails, social media handles. So that's a great way for us to really, I think, touch or visit with our legislators this upcoming session. You can go to the next one.
I have a question. Victor,
Sure.
so you were saying, getting back to your last statement, so you mean it's once we sign up for the alerts, that's basically all we have to do?
So you can sign up for our alerts, and that will kind of give you the most up-to-date information on what's happening and just the recovery substance use space with the legislators, as well as what Sarah's doing. And through those advocacy alerts and probably our newsletters, we'll send out those petitions for folks to sign on to. And when you sign on to that petition, it will email out to your legislator, both your delegate and your senator, state delegate, senator. So we're trying to make it easy for folks to sign on. I think sometimes the barrier of trying to find time to meet with your legislator, trying to find the right wording. Sarah really wants to kind of take care a lot of that on the back end for folks. And then you can obviously edit that letter if you want to share some of those like personal stories or that personal touch that we've talked through, that storytelling. You can add it there and it'll still shoot out.
I would like to add just a little bit to that though, Frederica, and that would be that if you have to really develop a relationship with your legislator, it takes time, as you know, and it's not something that can be done in January. If you don't know who your legislators are, you got to depend on Sarah to tell you, now's the time, sign here, whatever. But after the session is over, when things settle down, then's the time to have a virtual meeting with your legislators if we're still in COVID, and we probably will be through 2021, at least until the fall. And those meetings can be much longer. Just like Sam spent with us, we could have meetings with them and you get to know them much better. So hopefully we'll be able to plan something like that for later on.
Cool. Awesome. And so this is a great example of a sort of a generic, you can go back to the letter real fast. This is a great example of a kind of a generic letter that you can utilize. I think this will be available to you just outside of all of the emails after this event. And it's just a template for you to insert things like your name, what you support, any specific policy, and your reason why. And it's really just a guided template to get those get that experience out there. And it's something you can send directly to your legislator as well.
I think I would want to add on to that very first sentence, my name is, and I am your constituent. Often when we don't say that, they'll say, I wonder if this is one of our people. Because if it's one of their people, they'll read the email. If you're not one of their people, they won't. Does that make sense? Because you vote for them. So where it says, my name is Xavier McKeithen, and I am your constituent. That's all you need to say. And then you say the rest of the things. And I'm asking you to support or oppose. Does that make sense? Are you frozen, Victor? Uh-oh.
Okay, I would say yes, it does make sense because
Yeah.
of the fact that I've written Senator Warner as well as the Governor Ralph Northam in reference to my boundary crimes. And back in 2 years ago, I met them both and I took pictures with them and I asked them basically who could I send information to and how would I send information to you guys as far as getting my records expunged. And they told me, both said send them to their secretary, the person that's in charge of their all of the paperwork basically to come in. Yes, so I did, but I never heard anything.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I never heard anything. So it could have been the wording. It could have been.
But you know what? If it was it a federal offense or was it a state offense?
It was actually it was state. Yeah.
Okay, so it needs to go to the state. So we can have a conversation about that because then you would want to send it to your delegate and state senator, not to Warner and Kane and your congressman.
Yes.
But they are working on expungement right now, and so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some expungement bills that'll be sort of like blanket expungement for.
I hope so, because I've been fighting for like 4 years now, and nothing's happened. So I don't know if I was going to regenerate the letters and send them back out again to different people, or within the legislature.
Well, we can work on that.
Okay.
So Victor, I was talking to you and asking you to put, and I'm your constituent, and then you froze. And I thought I had said something terrible.
Just close the door on you.
Yeah, I was like, oh, wait a minute, he's just frozen. You weren't saying anything, and I'm going deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole.
I picked up my own meeting. No, I agree with you. Showing that one, I think that kind of wiggles their ear a little bit, that saying that you're one of their constituents.
And that has to be up. Yeah, it has to be up front because they will say to their administrative folks, if it's not from one of my constituents, put it in this file. If it's my constituent, I want to know. I keep that data just like Sam says. He has an idea of how many people who are his people who've asked him to support or oppose something.
Okay. Then I think we'll revamp that letter a little bit before we send it out. All right, thank you. All right, Betsy, if you want to go to the next one. This is really just our general legislative priorities, year in and year out, things that we push for. Strengthening access to effective and accountable recovery supports, addiction prevention, treatment, and services. And some of the things that include are the reimbursement rates for peer recovery specialists, those better peer recovery employment programs. So these kind of tie in what we were talking about before, with like the barrier crimes, things along those lines. Reducing stigma is big for us. We realize that shows up not just in conversation, but it shows up in decision making, whether it's housing, a job, resources. So it's ever expansive. Jenna, where are we? Implementing support statutes geared toward SUD and addiction recovery and wellness across the lifespan. And I think that's something important. It doesn't just stop in one space. This is something that we have to continually advocate for, and it stretches far beyond, I think, one incident. We can go to the next one.
Thank you.
These are some of the items coming up right now. Paid family medical leave with the family-friendly economy. Our thought behind this is that if you are working and you want to seek treatment, you shouldn't fear losing your job or taking that time. You should be able to utilize paid family medical leave in order to seek that treatment. And we believe it's the same if you are a family member or a supporter. So that's why we're really supporting that family-friendly economy. Another item is shifting that language from substance abuse to substance use, more recovery-oriented language. one of the things that I know we're currently looking at is how do we really start moving that across the government, the Virginia government, throughout the administration, utilizing that recovery-oriented language, substance use. And there are some other issue areas that we are supportive of. We know that there are many factors to a person's recovery or why, or addiction, anything from mental health to Medicaid expansion. We know race issues have their play in there. Family support, restoration of rights. Those are just some of the items that kind of are intersectional with what Sarah's priorities are. And we try to be supportive across the board. You can go to the next one. And so, ooh, cool, right on time. Try to make that quick. I was trying to make it quick. This is an opportunity if there was a question earlier that you didn't get a chance to ask or you just thought of as we were moving along. This is a great time to ask. Additionally, if you think of something after this is over, if you email communications@sarah.org, we will answer every question. We'll get back to you, whether it's sending out that legislator tool, kind of reviewing some of those tips that Delegate Razul mentioned, or anything else that you can think of. We're open. That's what we're here for.
Well, there are two questions. One about Sandra wanted to know whether we were going to do this again, but this is being recorded, Sandra, so you'll be able to see it afterwards. And then will these slides be made available? It's fine with me. It's up to Victor's the boss. I do what he tells me.
No, yeah, and we'll make the slides available. Just wanted to make sure it was cool with Becky. So probably in the next day or two, you can look out for an email from us with some of the items that we talked about. That letter, that Find Your Legislator tool, these slides, and any other general questions that we felt would be applicable to the whole group. We'll put in that. Cool. Is there any other questions? And I didn't quite answer that. We will do that again. I feel like I missed that first part. This, we believe, is one of many. This is just really the start. And something that popped up in this, I think, is the need for some more listening sessions. The ability to just kind of sit, listen to some of those unique experiences. And so those kind of unique questions that we probably don't always get a chance to see, but also play a part in the fabric of what we're pushing for. And that reception.
Yeah.
So those two are on my list, AKA Betsy's list.
And Becky. Betsy and Becky are too close together writing names.
Okay, so with that, just want to say thank you again, all, for joining us tonight. We hope that you were able to take away some great tools, some resources, a few laughs, and thoroughly enjoy your Wednesday evening. Please follow up with us, sign up for our newsletter. Just kind of stay connected. We are supportive of the SUD and addiction community, and we want to make sure that it's what we are pushing for really represents everyone throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening. Take care.